Okay, this is the first video on text in After Effects. A couple of things. Text pops up as a layer just like anything else in After Effects. So if I want to create a text layer, I can just right click here and say New Text, and it's going to create a layer right off the bat. A couple of things. A lot of the property pages for the text, they're going to pop up over here. There's character there and paragraph here, but then depending on the tools you've been using, these might shift around. So what you might want to do when you start a text titling session is take your workspace and switch it from standard over to text, and it's going to bring up the characters property page and the paragraph property page right off the bat. And I'm going to, let's see, little bit of a quick tour here. This is where I pick my type style, whether it's bold, the color of my type, the color of the stroke or the border, which I'll get to in a second, size of the font. If you're using high definition, you're probably going to want something up around 100 pixels. Kerning, leading, spacing between, tracking of the characters, the width of the stroke or the border, scale, baseline if you want to lift it up off the baseline. Basically, all the tools that you have for text work in Photoshop, you've got them down here. Whether it's flush left, centered in the frame, flush right. So now that I've got a text layer here, I'm just going to make sure I've got it. Undo. Let's make it one more time. Got my text. I'm going to click up here. Let's see. Dark. Stormy. And enter. If I now switch over from my text mode up here, which I got put in as soon as I created the layer, to my selection tool, I can just select the type, move it around. If I hold shift down, it's going to lock it horizontally or vertically, like so, and just be able to move it around. One thing you might notice when you're doing text over live video and the backgrounds is that depending on what your background is, the text may become hard to read. It's not legible, as you can see over here in this area. So I'm going to actually just blur out my background a little bit so that it makes the text a little bit more legible. So I'm going to come over to my effects and preset and just type in blur, which is going to bring in a whole bunch of different kinds of blurs. And what I want is the fast blur, just because I want it to render relatively quickly. And I'm going to take the blur and actually drop it onto my background layer, not on the text layer, but on my background. And you see now I'm up here in my effects, and I'm going to just crank up the blurriness. And now if I come back up to my text, see, it does make it quite a bit more legible. So when you're doing opens to shows or anything else, that is one technique, is just to blur out the background like that. Okay, so what I'm going to actually want to add in here now also is the stroke or a border, just at this point, so you can see how that works. So with my text layer selected, the option here where it says fill over stroke, if I open this up a little bit, see now I've got a border, and it's picking up red because this is the color that I picked right over here. If I want to change that, I can click on it and shift it. See how it's adjusting? And when I get the color I want, I just say OK. Eyedropper and pick a color off the screen if I want to do that, and then just swap it back for my color here. In After Effects, they use the term stroke, but I also know this as a border in a lot of programs. And then the fill over stroke, the blue is the fill, it's the main color, and the red is the stroke. If I switch this to stroke over fill, you see now I've made my stroke big enough so that it's actually bleeding over onto the fill. So normally you'd probably want to keep the fill over stroke, which puts the blue color on top and actually gives you a border around the edge here. Basic text, a couple other little things you might want to try. Just like any other layer, you can apply effects to it. So let's come over here under, I'm going to get rid of the blur and let's try a ripple. And I've got my ripple effect here under distort, and I'm going to drop this one actually on my text. So the property comes up, and if I open up my text layer here now, you can see under effects there's my ripple. And what I want to do is I've got a radius. Yeah, there we go. This little icon here is the center of my ripple. As you can see, I can move this along. This is animatable, and you can see how the center of the ripple is adjusting. I'm going to open up the radius a little bit more, just so it's, and center this guy up. Could even put it right there, but let's come down here a little bit and bring out the radius. I just want to sort of distort this a little bit so you can see what is happening. And let's see, wave speed, let's just take the defaults. Now if I just do a slow bit on the phase, you can see how that's going to distort. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. And you can see if I come over here, I could animate this across. I really want it to keep the same, so I'm going to raise up the radius again. Alright, so we've got everything. And let's pull this down. See how it's all sort of centered and centered based on this point here. And then I'm going to see how I can just sort of key this, or not, but I can just adjust this. And if I pull this away a little bit, there we go. Yeah, like so. Then if I were to animate the phase a little bit, and the transparency. So let's just give a few keyframes here and see what we get. Under this ripple effect, you can see everything else is duplicated under here. You can get to it from 2 different locations. But with this up on my first frame here, let's just take and key the center of the ripple. And then I'm going to come down the timeline, let's say over 10. I'm just going to make this like a 10-second effect. And we're just going to move this center of the ripple over a little bit. And let's see how that goes. That might work. Alright, so let's try that. We can key the phase a little bit, starting on the first frame. And in this case, I am going to match my effects. So what I'm going to do is open up so I can get the keyframe here. The center of the ripple, go down to this keyframe, and just change the phase slightly. Cache it. Like I said, blurs do tend to take a little bit of time, even a fast blur. Okay, now let's bring this in. So what we're going to want to do is actually, on our text, close this up, come up to the transform, and this is where every layer has a transform, and opacity is part of the transform properties. So what I'm going to do is go down to my first frame, which I am, and key the opacity, and actually take this down to 0. And then let's go down about 4 frames, or 4 seconds, let's say, right about. Let's say you're at 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and I'm just going to bring my opacity up, and let's just see how that plays. I have to cache it. Every time you make a change, it's going to invalidate the cache and have you recache it. There we go. And that's working. What I don't want, though, is the ripple to stay on to the point where you can't read this. So I'm going to come down the timeline like maybe another second. Let's say 4 seconds. And let's see, now that that's on, what I'm going to do again is key the radius down to 0. And let's open this up. Let me undo that. Okay, back to my key. Sorry guys, I'm doing this blasting through, so yes, if I make a mistake, I'm going to keep going. My radius, what I want, I'm going to go back to my first frame, and I'm going to key the radius, and then come down to 4 seconds. And take my radius down to 0. And let's cache that. And let's go ahead and stop that. Play it back. I said stop that. And there you have it. And there you have it. I suppose at this point, once I've read it for a little bit, let's come up, let's say 7 seconds. Let's go back to our opacity. I want to actually, if you have a keyframe, if you want to put a keyframe but keep the value since you have to make a change, what you can do is under opacity, I'm just going to take the 100% down and take it back up to 100%. And so now I've got 2 keyframes that are the same at 100%, just to hold it there. And then I'm going to come down about a second and take it down to 0. And let's cache this. And that would give you a transition point that you could actually work on. In fact, here, let's take this one step further. Let me open up the fast blur. And our blurriness was at 49 pixels. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm on my first frame, and I'm going to keyframe the blurriness. And then I'm going to leave the background up to this point here. Let's go down to the next keyframe. So I'm sitting on the opacity there. And I'm going to change this and then back and type in 49 just so I've got the same value there. And then I'm going to go down, let's say 10 frames, which if I hold control down and use the left right arrows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's 10 frames. And let's take the blurriness down to 0. And let's see how that works. Alright, so let's come back home. And let's cache it. And let's play it. That was a little fast, so let's come down to this keyframe here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my timeline by using the slider here, and I'm just going to take the blurriness keyframe and take it down a couple more frames, so it takes a little bit longer to blur out, or to clear out, like so. Let's cache this again. And then let's come back to the beginning. And that gives you something that might start the open to your show, along with music and not the street sounds. Maybe those mixed in a little. But anyway, so that's a little bit of working with type and just sort of setting yourself up to do something interesting. On to the next video.